I find it really interesting that in the times we're in right now in our country, where so much seems to be going in one direction, you have a situation like this where the Supreme Court is actually entertaining the idea of overturning Roe versus Wade, which is absolutely incredible to me, having grown up all my life under the shadow of Roe versus Wade, and that essentially being the law of the land in our country. But things are changing. The tide is turning in many ways, and you can see that with what's happening right now. Mississippi has a law or an act that they put in place that would ban abortions after 15 weeks. And I believe it was shot down by certain federal courts, but the Supreme Court agreed to take up the case. So that's what this is talking about. This started on December 1st, 2021, this case. It says the Supreme Court's conservatives lean towards limiting abortion rights after dramatic oral arguments on Mississippi law banning abortions after 15 weeks. So I'm not going to read this whole article. I'll read a little bit of it just so you get a taste of what's happening here. It says the Supreme Court seemed poised Wednesday to uphold a Mississippi law that bars abortion after 15 weeks, but it is less clear if there is a clear majority to end the right to abortion nationwide, although conservative justices express skepticism about the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. The dispute represents the culmination of a decades-long effort on the part of critics of the landmark opinion that legalized abortion nationwide to return the issue to the states, a move that would almost immediately eviscerate abortion rights in large swaths of the South and Midwest. So one thing to note here is that the way that this is worded could make some people think that all of a sudden in the South people won't be able to have abortion. But even if you just take this law right here that's before the Supreme Court, it says that it is banning abortions after 15 weeks. So there still, in Mississippi, would be the ability to have an abortion before 15 weeks. But a lot of times that seems to be missed in how things are presented. And obviously that is because, people have an agenda and they're trying to show that, okay, all of our rights are being threatened, and so that's why they tend to frame things that way. But going on, the article says the very fact that the current court, with its solid 6-member conservative majority, agreed to even consider a state law that bars abortion long before viability suggests that the court, bolstered by 3 of former President Donald Trump's appointees, is poised to scale back court precedent, if not reverse it outright. So what is at stake here is the idea of barring abortion long before viability, as it puts it here. In other words, in previous court cases, it basically said, from what I understand, that women have the right to an abortion, and no state can ban the ability to have an abortion before the fetus is viable, before the baby can exist and live outside of the womb. So if you are having an abortion before the viability of that baby, they protect that previously. But now that is being threatened, and it's possible that even an unborn child that is not viable on its own outside the womb, it's possible that women will not be able to have an abortion even before the time that the baby is viable. It says here too, already in a separate dispute, the court is considering a Texas law that bars the procedure after 6 weeks, and the justices have allowed that law to remain in place for 3 months, rendering Roe a dead letter in the country's second largest state. So the Mississippi case is just one of the cases about abortion, and there's also the case in Texas, and it sounds like the Supreme Court is also going to make a decision about that as well. That is a possibility. Going on, though, later in the article it says Mississippi's Gestational Age Act, passed in 2018 but blocked by 2 federal courts, allows abortion after 15 weeks only in medical emergencies or for severe fetal abnormality, and has no exception for rape or incest. But one thing that it is saying here is that the Mississippi Gestational Age Act does actually allow for abortion after 15 weeks in cases of medical emergencies or for severe fetal abnormality. So there are exceptions, but what it is trying to do is basically make abortion in that state illegal, essentially, after 15 weeks. But again, before that, there still in Mississippi would be the ability to have an abortion. It says if doctors perform abortions outside the parameters of the law, they will have their medical licenses suspended or revoked and may be subject to additional penalties and fines. Mississippi Solicitor General Scott Stewart was blunt in his opening. Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey haunt our country, Stewart said. They have no basis in the Constitution. They have no home in our history or traditions. They've damaged the democratic process. They poison the law. They've choked off compromise. For 50 years, they've kept this court at the center of a political battle that it can never resolve, and 50 years on, they stand alone. Nowhere else does this court recognize a right to end a human life. So that is from the side of the anti-abortion argument, from the side of the Mississippi Act here. I do think it's interesting he points out that what has happened in the past with like Roe versus Wade, it says for 50 years, these kinds of decisions have kept this court at the center of a political battle that it can never resolve. I think that's a pretty interesting argument. And actually, there's a lot of truth in that, obviously, that with these decisions over the years, the Supreme Court really hasn't settled the issue in a way that has satisfied all of the states in the United States. So it's a very interesting argument he's making there. It says, arguing for the Biden administration in support of the clinics, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar urged the justices to uphold precedent and avoid a ruling that would disproportionately harm women who have come to depend upon the decision. For a half a century, this court has correctly recognized that the Constitution protects a woman's fundamental right to decide whether to end a pregnancy before viability, she argued. That guarantee that the state cannot force a woman to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth has engendered substantial individual and societal reliance. The real-world effects of overruling Roe and Casey would be severe and swift. It's interesting how she frames this whole issue, that the state cannot force a woman to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth. Of course, that is not really considering the bigger picture of how women get pregnant. And of course, there are going to be debates about rape and incest. Nevertheless, I think it's definitely skewed to say that the issue here is about the state forcing a woman to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth. But it is an interesting argument nonetheless. She added, the court has never revoked a right that is so fundamental to so many Americans and so central to their ability to participate fully and equally in society. And I think this gets to the heart of the issue for pro-abortion advocates, that to them what it's really about is women being able to, as it says here, participate fully and equally in society. One of the problems that I have with that whole argument, though, that whole outlook, is that it makes it sound like pregnancy is some sort of a curse, some sort of a bad thing that a woman can get pregnant. That pregnancy doesn't allow women to participate fully and equally in society in some way. And I understand what they're getting at there, but I think it just shows a fundamental flaw in our thinking in our country, that when it comes to equality, we have a very skewed way of looking at things. I mean, you have to think, just about the fact that women can give birth and men cannot give birth, that right there, there's an inequality. And if a man wants to give birth, he's unable to. So things in real life, in the way that nature has, given us things, the way that God has given us things, it's not equal in the way that they're talking about. But I would argue that it doesn't need to be. Women should be able to do things that men can't do, such as give birth and nurse children and all of that. But men are able to, I guess you could say, have more flexibility in how they do certain things because they are unable to give birth. That is not something they ever have to deal with. But I think it just shows here what is at the heart of the issue, kind of that resentment that women have to deal with something that men don't have to deal with. And they ultimately have a problem with that. But again, I think that ultimately looks at pregnancy like it is in many ways kind of this burden and curse on women. And I think that's just really the wrong way to look at everything. Anyway, that gives you a taste of what the article is talking about. I'd love to hear what you think about all of this in the comments below. I know probably most people who watch my channel are pro-life and are overall going to be happy to see a move in this direction, although I know many people would like to see much more progress than what we're seeing here. But there are perhaps people that are pro-choice and have really different opinions and strong feelings about this. I would love to hear the discussion in the comments below, see your thoughts. Just make sure you keep your discussion constructive and helpful. But thank you so much for taking a look at this issue with me from A Frisch Perspective.